Hi, this is Mr. Seymour, and this is Chapter 10, Congress. Kirsten Gillibrand, a Democrat of New York, greets panel members testifying at a Senate hearing on sexual assault in the military. Senator Gillibrand is testifying or trying to change how the Pentagon handles the increase in sexual assaults. Here, Senator Gillibrand shakes hands with Air Force Lieutenant General Richard Harding before greeting Army Lieutenant General Dana Chipman, who is next to him. Congress is often highly responsive to its constituents' needs. For example, by providing funding for transportation projects such as new highways, Congress shows its responsiveness to the needs of the people. Congress is deemed the first branch and it has vast enumerated powers, as can be seen in Article 1 of the Constitution. We have a bicameral Congress. Bicameralism is the system of having two chambers within one legislative body, like the House and the Senate in the United States Congress. The House has 2-year terms in the House, and 6-year terms are in the Senate. So senators serve a longer period by 3 times as long. And the House, if you remember, the House, you're always up for re-election because you're representing the people. The founders viewed the House as more passionate than the Senate, or as the hot coffee that needed to be cooled in the saucer of the Senate. The perception probably did not include coming to blows over differences in policy, as Congressman Albert G. Brown and John A. Wilcox did in 1851 about whether Mississippi should secede from the Union. Descriptive representation is valuable as it helps ensure greater trust in the political system, and there are benefits in being represented by someone who shares demographic characteristics with their constituency. Particularly for historically disadvantaged minorities. Descriptive representation means, or really asks the question, does the member of Congress look like me? Is it descriptive or representative of the body from which they were elected? Substantive representation means, does the member of Congress vote the way we want him to vote? Does he vote the right way? Does he act as a trustee versus a delegate? We call these people politicos. Compared with a generation ago, the number of women and racial and ethnic minorities in Congress has increased. But on those dimensions, how representative of the people is Congress? How close does Congress come to looking like us? What do the numbers say? Well, if you look at the numbers, 81% of the House is male, 19% is female, whereas we have 51% of the, or 52% of the population is female and 48% is male. So right there, that should tell you something. And in the Senate, 21% of the representation is female and 79% male. And roughly 51% of our population is female, and 49% is male. So I fudged the numbers a little bit when I said 52 and 48, because a lot of people are saying it is closer to 52 and 48. But officially, according to these numbers, it's 51 and 49. But still, there are more females than males, yet at the same time, we have 4 or 5 times more females or more males in Congress, in the House, than we do in the Senate. I'm sorry, let's go back and say this again. We have about 4 to 5 times more males in the House than we do females, and in the Senate, it's about 4 times more males in the Senate than we have females. So it's not truly representative when you look at the population as a whole in terms of gender. Compared with a generation ago, The number of women and racial and ethnic minorities in Congress has increased. But on those dimensions, how representative of the people is Congress? How close does Congress come to looking like us? And again, what do the numbers say? And here, we're looking at racial composition. 80% of the House of Representatives is white, and 91% of the Senate is white, whereas only 61.6% of the population of the United States is white, 17.6% is Latino, 12.4% is African American, 5.4% is Asian American, and 3% is considered other. So in the House, only 7% versus 17%. 7% of the House is Latino, and 10% of the House is African American. In the Senate, 91% is white, 4% Latino, 3% African American, and less than 1% is Asian American or other. So that's not representative, especially the Senate. Members of Congress are often criticized for being out of touch with their constituents. Based on a USA Today poll, Americans seem to want their congressional members to vote in line with their constituents' views, to work across party lines, and to spend more time in the district rather than in Washington, D.C. But what happens if these goals conflict? What if the member represents a very partisan district where the majority does not want her to work with the other party? Also, is there no room for a trustee who follows his or her conscience and sticks to their principles? So you can look and see what people want from Congress. What people want is somebody who votes the way they want them to vote, and will work across party lines, and will spend more time in the home district, which is why you have the Thursday afternoon exodus from Congress, from Washington. You have people who leave on Thursday, go back home, stay till Sunday, come back, and then work Monday to Wednesday or Thursday morning. Part of the high incumbency re-election rate is that members are actively working to keep their jobs. They know that inattentiveness or wrong votes can cost them their position. The electoral connection explains members' behavior. They're always running scared. Members of Congress never know what issue will be used against them in the next election. And to promote re-election, they have advantages. They can advertise, they can claim credit for pieces of legislation that have been passed or not passed, and they can take positions. And by taking positions, if those positions tend to be representative of the district that they come from, then they tend to get more attention and probably a higher chance of re-election. The whole House is up for re-election every 2 years, so the line showing the re-election of the House members in a given election year represents the percentage of the entire House. Since senators are up for re-election every 6 years, only 1/3 of their members are seeking re-election in a 2-year period. The line for the Senate represents the percentage of those who were up for re-election in that election year. Notice that the House members have an easier time getting re-elected than the senators do. And part of the reason for that is that senators serve for a longer period of time. Also, there's only 2 senators per state, whereas House members represent a specific geographic area of the state. And so House members have an 80 to 90% re-election rate or higher, whereas Senate members have anywhere from about 50% to about 80% re-election rates, depending on the political environment of the election year. The goal of re-election is central to understanding congressional behavior. Home style helps explain high incumbency safety. Different constituencies expect different kinds of home styles. Do you think that members of Congress spend too much time at home? Should they spend more time in Washington representing us and voting? Now let's look at campaign fundraising. Campaign fundraising can cost more than $1 million to run a credible challenge. I just looked at the newspaper, and just for Congressman O'Rourke's soon-to-be vacant seat, they've already collected over $1 million, and one candidate has collected over $700,000 alone. The high cost of fundraising helps scare away potential challengers, but it also scares away groups of people. So if you're somebody who is dependent upon your job, who doesn't have a lot of money, you're not going to be running for Congress. You're going to be somebody who's financially secure, has connections, and is able to get the support of the party financially and the support of backers financially to be able to raise enough money to run for Congress. Your home style is a congressman's way or congressperson's way of relating to his or her district. And we have what's called the Tuesday to Thursday Club. The Tuesday to Thursday Club means that these are people who only stay in Washington from Tuesday to Thursday, and then they're back in their home districts on Friday up to Monday, leaving on Monday to go back to Congress. And these particular people are very much indebted to their home district, and so they believe they need to spend more time in their home district. In order to ensure that districts are equal in population, each of the districts, congressional districts, is apportioned. And the apportionment is carried out by the states, by the state legislatures. Now, when redistricting is done on political lines or lines to give you a political advantage, it's called gerrymandering. There are two kinds of gerrymanders, partisan and racial. Partisan gerrymanders are redistricting that benefits candidates from one party and hurts candidates from the other party. Racial gerrymanders are redistricting to help or hurt the chances of minority legislative candidates. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 mandated that districting plans for many parts of the South, including Texas, be approved by the United States Department of Justice or Washington, D.C. District Court. Candidate gerrymanders are redistricting that favor certain individual candidates, particularly state legislators wanting to run for the United States House. Critics of the practice of gerrymandering say that in every democracy, the people choose their leaders, but only in America do the politicians choose their constituents. Is this a fair criticism? Now, this is 1992 North Carolina redistricting. This set of House districts was the subject of the landmark Supreme Court ruling Shaw versus Reno in 1993, in which the court said that appearances matter. When drawing district lines, do you think that that's true? Should other factors such as race, party, and competitiveness play a greater role in shaping a district than simply collecting a group of constituents in a geographic area? Look at the let me have my pointer here. Look at the strange lines here. Look at this one here. Look at this one here. This is District 2. Do you see the odd shapes that these take? Here's District 8. Back over this way, over here, up here, back around here, down here, around here. Do you see the odd shapes they take? Here's District 10. So the Supreme Court said that when you're looking at districting, the appearance of the districts matters. This is District 1. Look at this one. It goes all the way from up here in the northern part of the state skips parts, and goes all the way down to the southern part of the state. All right. So we have different types of gerrymanders. We have partisan gerrymanders, and we have racial gerrymanders, and we have candidate gerrymanders. Gridlock is an inability to enact legislation because of partisan conflict within Congress or between Congress and the President. There are two separate factors in looking at gridlock. First, there's little public consensus on how to handle important issues and leading to impasse. Second, politicians prioritize local needs over national ones because their voters are local. But maybe Congress is getting a bad rap. Maybe Congress is doing its best at the job of fulfilling mutually exclusive wants. The want of the people from El Paso that are represented by Congressman O'Rourke are not the same as the wants of the people of Austin, for instance. Should the politicians be thinking strictly of national wants and desires? Are local districts getting their fair share, or more than their fair share, of available projects and funding individuals to receive help in dealing with this bureaucracy, such as help in getting Social Security benefits or military pensions to which a constituent is entitled? Members of Congress spend a good deal of time in their districts, developing relationships with constituents. Here represent Jason Chaffetz of Utah. Jason Chaffetz of Utah meets constituents after a town hall meeting. Members of Congress want to be reelected, and this goal explains much of their behavior. In 2016, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, won re-election. Given his leadership position within the party, McCarthy must be especially careful to balance local interests with the good of the nation as a whole. Universalism is the idea that all members of Congress get some piece of the pie when divvying up things like Pentagon weapons deals or highway transportation bills. Now, you have an informal structure of Congress which works around universalism, log rolling, which basically is trading votes, earmarks, which basically is holding back a piece of a specific advantage that can go to a representative area, like, for instance, a hospital, a VA hospital, or a military base, or what we like to call pork barrel spending. Specialization and seniority. The formal structure of congressional work revolves around parties and party leaders, committees, and committee staffs. So in the majority party structure of the House of Representatives, you have your members of the majority party who elect a policy committee chair, a Republican or a majority conference chair, a whip, a majority leader, standing committee members and chairpeople, members of the budget committee. They also use steering committees and work with the Speaker of the House in order to determine who's going to be on those committees. The same thing works in the minority. You have your committee chairs, you have your conference chairs, you have your whips, you have your minority leader, and you have your minority whip, you have your committee members who are going to be in less seniority. your majority party gets to pick who are going to be the senior members and who are going to be the not the senior members, but the regular members of the committees. Party votes are said to occur when a majority of one party opposes a majority of the other party, and the party unity refers to the percentage of the party members who vote together on party votes. These two graphs make two important points. First, partisanship has increased in the last 2 decades in terms of both the proportion of party votes and the level of party unity. Second, despite these increased levels of partisanship, only about 2/3 of all votes in the House and the Senate divide the two parties. Given this potentially conflicting observation, how would you assess the argument that partisanship in Congress is far too intense? Well, look at things today. Just this week, we had a situation over a group of soldiers who were killed in the country of Niger, and we had wranglings between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party on how the president handled the situation and whether or not the president was appropriate in the way that he handled the widow. And that's not even a party vote. When you get to partisanship right now, the Democrats are on one side of the aisle, the Republicans are on the other side of the aisle, and basically there is no give and take, but maybe 1 or 2 votes. That's not partisan. That's partisanship. That's not unity. Okay. Party unity is the amount of time, or the amount to which the parties, members of each party, are united in staying together in their votes. And party unity has increased. Again, showing more partisanship. Although party polarization in Congress has been high in the past, it lessened in the early 20th century. Polarization has increased steadily in the last 70 years, and today's Congress is more polarized than ever. What do you think causes such polarization? Think of the reasons, and let me show you how we know that we're polarized right now. This is the gap in the House and the Senate. Okay? And what it's looking at is the ideological difference between the parties in each chamber. So right now, ideologically, the Senate is a lot more ideologically stable than the House. If you look at the House, it's not stable. That's why you have that line. House Speaker Paul Ryan, a Republican of Wisconsin, who's also your Speaker of the House, his constituents talks to his constituents at a listening session in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He's from Wisconsin. Here, party leadership is central in the legislative process. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat of New York, who's on the left. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, a Republican for Wisconsin, who's on the right. And House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California, who's behind them in the purple pantsuit, must work together and with other members of Congress to pass legislation. And they notoriously don't work together. The committee system creates a division of labor that helps in the re-election of members of Congress by supporting members' specialization and credit claiming. You have standing committees, which are permanent parts of the House or Senate structure with more authority than other committees. You have select committees, which are created to address a specific issue. And you have joint committees, which contain members of both houses, but with limited authority. And you have conference committees, which are created for one purpose, which is to negotiate a difference between the House and the Senate versions of a piece of legislation. This is a list of all the committees in the House, the Senate, and the joint committees. I'm not going to go through all of them here in this particular recording, but if you look at table 10.2 in your book, you will find this, this particular document. And it shows you what the standing committees are, and the joint committees, and the committees that are specific to the Senate and to the House. There are equivalent committees in the House and Senate and some joint committees that work on similar problems and craft similar bills, whose differences must be reconciled before a final bill becomes law. The equivalent or similar committees in both chambers are listed across from each other in this particular document. Now let's talk about types of legislation. You have bills, which are legislative proposals that become law if passed by both the House and the Senate in identical form and approved by the President. Each is assigned a bill number with HR indicating bills that originate in the House and SR indicating bills that originate in the Senate. Private bills are concerned with a specific individual or organization and often address immigration or naturalization issues. Public bills affect the general public if enacted into law. A simple resolution is legislation used to express the sense of the House or Senate designated by HRes and SRes. Simple resolutions affect only the chamber passing the resolution, are not signed by the President, and cannot become law. Resolutions are often used for symbolic legislation, such as congratulating a sports team or naming a post office after a famous person. A concurrent resolution is legislation that is used to express the position of both chambers in a non-legislative manner, to set the annual budget or to fix adjournment dates, designated by H-Con-Res, S-Con-Res. Concurrent resolutions are not signed by the President and therefore do not carry the weight of law. A joint resolution is legislation that has few practical differences from a bill, which passes both chambers in identical form, signed by the President. Unless it proposes a constitutional amendment, in that case a two-thirds majority of those present and voting in both the House and the Senate and ratification by 3/4 of the states are required for the amendment to be adopted, and it does not require the President's signature to become an amendment. Passing legislation is difficult. If anything that you've noticed with the relationship between President Trump and Congress, you should notice this. Passing legislation is difficult. For a piece of legislation to become law, it must be passed in identical form by both chambers and signed by the President. Only 2 to 4% of the 10,000 plus bills that are introduced every year become law. A filibuster is a tactic used by senators to block a bill by continuing to hold the floor and speak until the bill's supporters back down. Filibuster means in Latin to talk to death. Cloture is a procedure through which the Senate can limit the amount of time spent on debating and therefore end a filibuster. And by the way, filibusters only happen in the Senate, not in the House. Presidential response can be one of two. He can sign the bill or he can veto the bill. If he vetoes the bill, Congress may override the bill with a two-thirds majority. There's one other thing he can do, and that is to wait to the end of the session and to let it die without signing it, which is called a pocket veto. During the 2010 portion of the health care debate, the filibuster became a big issue when Scott Brown won a special election for the state for the late Senator Ted Kennedy's old Senate seat. It soon looked as if the entire Affordable Care Act wouldn't be able to pass, even though the Democrats had a 59-41 advantage. Many Democratic-leaning commentators opined that the filibuster was badly undemocratic and that it should either be eliminated or cloture should be reduced to 55 votes. In other words, you need 55 votes to end, instead of 60, to end a filibuster. Republican-leaning commentators said that it was dangerous to cast aside time-tested rules of momentary convenience, and this proposed move was just sour grapes. Well, guess what happened? When the Republicans got control of Congress, they said, let's get rid of the filibuster and let's have cloture. And the Democrats said, tough sour grapes. So whoever's in the minority is usually on the sour grape side, and whoever's in the majority usually does not want the ability to have a filibuster. They want cloture. Former Secretary of State and Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton testifies before the House Senate Committee in Benghazi in October of 2015. Clinton faced tough questioning over her response to the attack on the United States diplomatic compound in Benghazi and her use of a private email server while serving as Secretary of State. Let's look at how things work in theory. Passing legislation. The Speaker of the House receives the bill. It's sent to committee. From the committee, it's assigned to subcommittee. Then it's reported out of full committee. Then it goes to a Rules Committee. Then it goes to the House floor. Then a House bill is created and sent to the Senate. And the same thing can happen on the Senate side in order to go to the House. So that means that the House version of a bill and the Senate version of a bill may not be the same, and that's important to understand. So on the Senate side, the President of the Senate receives the bill. The committee is assigned. It goes to subcommittee. It's reported out of the full committee. If it makes it out of committee, the majority leader then amends or approves the bill for committee from the committee, and it's sent to the Senate floor. And from the Senate, it's sent over to the House. Now, what happens if the two sides do not come with an identical bill? This is the important thing. If both sides cannot come up with an identical bill, you have to go to another process. The House amends the Senate bill. The Senate amends the House bill. The Senate bill goes to the House floor. The House bill goes to the Senate floor. If you can't reconcile the two to come up to an exact duplicate of each other, then you go to conference committee, where the House modifies the Senate bill, the Senate modifies the House bill, and you come up with one bill. Okay? The House approves the Senate bill, the Senate approves the House bill. You now have one bill, which then is sent to the President for presidential action. Veto, approval, or approval. And if it's vetoed, it goes back to the House and Senate floor. You can have an override, and then in that case, it becomes law. If it's approved, it becomes law. President Obama here is signing the omnibus spending bill in Washington, D.C. in January 2014. This bill funded a broad range of military and discretionary programs. Omnibus bills are funding bills. A sitting president can be a powerful ally in a campaign. In 2016, President Obama campaigned with Senate candidate Catherine Cortez Masto, a Democrat of Nevada, who ultimately won her race. Now let's look at an example of how things work in practice. And that the example is the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. In the House and in the Senate, you had 3 committees of the House crafting the bill and 5 committees working on the Senate version. Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House at the time. She added things. Okay. And Majority Leader Harry Reid, he added things. Meanwhile, President Obama, who was intensely involved, and the White House held daily meetings with the committees and with the Speaker of the House and the House Majority Leader. The House passed its version. The Senate passed its version. There was no conference committee. Instead, committed leaders committee leaders, the White House staff, and party leadership negotiated the details of the bills. So then the Senate version of the bill was passed by the House, but the House added a few things. And they also passed a separate reconciliation bill that included many amendments to the Senate version. So it was amended in the Senate, in the House. The Senate amendments had to be amended in the House version of the bill. Reconciliation bill was then amended by the Senate, was passed. The amended reconciliation bill was then passed by the House, where it went to the Senate, to the President, where it's signed into law. President Obama signed the 2 acts into law, but both of which compromised ACA. This is Senator Ted Cruz holding he held the fourth on the Senate floor for more than 21 hours, expressing his opposition to the ACA in September of 2013. He was